Welcome to TypeScript FM, the friendly podcast for TypeScript developers where we bring you news, updates, and interviews from the community with plenty of tomfoolery sprinkled in. I'm your host, Kamran Ayub, and I'm joined by my co-host and best bud, Eric Onerheim. Together, we're the two TypeScript fools. Welcome to the show. Hey, welcome to the show.
Welcome to the show. How's it going?
It's going pretty well. I finished booking all my 2026 travel.
Is that exciting or terrifying?
Well, my bank account is terrified, but we are excited. We're going to a lot of cool places this upcoming year. So remember that I went to that retreat at Lake Tahoe. Well, we're going again, but this time I'm bringing the whole fam.
Yeah.
But they're not going to be at the retreat with me. They're going to be enjoying Lake Tahoe and doing hiking and going to the beach and all that type of stuff. But the place that we're at has cabins you can rent, and they have a lake view and everything. Cool. Yep. So mother-in-law's coming. My whole family will be there. And then my coach also put on a retreat where she lives in New Hampshire, and that is in October, next October. So I'm doing that. And then during the summer, we decided on our trip. We initially thought that we might do Peru, but we're going to put that off another year, I think. Mm-hmm. And we're going to do the Atlantic coast. So we're going to arrive in Maine, then go up into Canada, go to Newfoundland and Labrador and stuff, and kind of go along the coast.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah, so it should be a lot of fun. And then we'll also hit Acadia National Park while we're there.
One of my all-time fantasies is to fly to Maine, hang out in Maine for a little bit, then go into Canada and take a train across Canada, and then fly home from the West Coast.
Nice.
I feel like that'd be so fun. I don't know if that's even possible.
I don't know.
I've dreamed about doing something like that. I don't even know if there's a train that could do that.
I don't know. I think if there was, it would be a very long ride.
Oh, yeah. I'm okay with that.
You could do the Amtrak across the U.S.
I've heard middling reviews with Amtrak.
Well, we took Amtrak way back in college to visit Cassie's family because it was a little bit easier than taking the car. But with kids, I don't know. Let's see. Other than that, me and my son put together this cool Lego Jaws set. So this was part of the Lego Ideas where people can submit ideas and then Lego, if it gets upvoted enough, will actually make it into an official set. So this one has Jaws, the big, huge shark. So it's a really big shark and then the boat. So it's pretty sweet.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so I have it in the background of my videos now, but you're not really going to be able to see it because of the lighting, but it's there and it's cool.
I saw some of the pictures. I was ready with my Jaws memes.
That's right. And then because Halloween's coming up, we put up Halloween decorations. Have you put yours up yet?
No, we intended to put them up at the beginning of September because we're we want to enjoy these for the maximum amount of time. And we want to be those people on the block that have the Halloween decorations up a little too early. Mm-hmm. But it's my favorite holiday. It is my favorite holiday. But we've been so sick and tired, we just haven't gotten around to it. So, yeah, we're going to have to put them up soon. But I'm hosting an event this weekend, so it's probably not happening this weekend.
What are you doing?
I am hosting the in-person event for Ludum Dare 58, and it's going to be hosted by the IGDA Twin Cities, which I am a board member of. And we're going to be at the 2DCon HQ, and they've graciously let us use their space.
That's cool.
So it'll be awesome. And we'll see if I am able to make a game. I'm going to try to corral my friends into making a game with me over that weekend. This last weekend, I released, finally, Excalibur V031, which has 6 months of changes in it. But
new release.
It's got a lot of cool stuff. I won't rattle it all off, but it's got a lot of really cool things, a lot of performance improvements, a lot of bug fixes. Two notable features is you can now do more sophisticated entity component system queries. So you can do and or not queries kind of thing. So it's basically like a database. And then you can now do sound manager stuff where you can do your own mix of volumes for the various clips that you might collect for your game. But the cool thing that I did with this one is I went and did all of the NPM provenance for all of the packages, and I did OIDC trusted publishing for all of them. So I've deleted all my NPM tokens. So now it's all OIDC trusted publishing and NPM provenance for all of the packages.
So you actually did the stuff that we were talking about on the podcast.
I did the stuff.
What other people probably should.
You should do it. It's not terribly difficult to do. I even did it for our NuGet version of the package too.
Nice.
So NuGet supports this. It wasn't terribly difficult to do, perhaps slightly fiddly, because both sides need to match up, which is good, but it wasn't too bad. So I found myself moving pretty quick and doing it.
Nice.
Yeah, you just did a bunch of dev container work for Excalibur too.
Yep, and we did a little bit of dev container stuff, so that when contributors, if they don't want to install all the system dependencies for like Playwright and all the browsers and stuff to run tests, they can just use a dev container in Visual Studio Code, and WebStorm also supports dev containers. But it basically is like running code spaces essentially on your local machine powered through Docker. So it has everything installed, all the Node.js toolchain, all the Playwright toolchain. You can just do npm run build, npm run test or whatever, and it just works. So it's pretty nice.
I also want to toss a shout out to Matt Jennings, who also contributed quite a bit to that dev container effort as well.
Yeah. One thing that we learned through that effort was some of the benefit of splitting up your vtest test suite into multiple projects, and it's really simple to do. You can have multiple configs, and then in your package.json scripts, you can say like, use this project. So we have 2 projects now in Excalibur, unit tests and visual tests. The visual tests take longer to run, and they use a lot more graphics rendering, so they're not always applicable to every single platform, and sometimes they can even have inconsistencies across platforms. So the unit tests are all separate, and that's what gets run by default when you do npm run test. But now we added another project where you can run visual tests separately.
That's awesome. I'm working on the next round of art with the artist. I'm very excited. It looks really cool. So I might be able to share some of that soon.
Have you plugged in any of the art into the game?
I haven't yet. I got to do that. I have to have a private build going yet.
Nice.
So we'll do that.
Well,
and
once you do, you can post some screenshots. That'll be cool.
I will.
Sweet. Should we get into the news?
Let's get into the news for the week of September 22nd, 2025.
Yeah. Well, let's start with the PSA. You might have already gotten this email if you've taken the survey in the past, but if you haven't, the State of JavaScript 2025 survey is out right now. So go fill that in and tell everybody what tools and what frameworks that you've been using. And then also, of course, vote us in.
Yeah, it would be super cool if you wrote in Excalibur JS and TypeScript FM.
Yep. If you use Excalibur, you should for sure do it. But if you listen to us, you should add us too. Maybe we'll show up on the poll. So we'll see.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Nice.
Next, we have some TypeScript news.
Ooh.
TypeScript 6 will now enable no unchecked side effect imports by default.
What does that mean?
Yes. So this means it will increase type safety by erroring if you try to import like a non-existing file. So like if you're trying to import like a file that doesn't make sense, but it has a side effect to it, it'll error, which is nice because it's usually either A, a bug, or B, like some magic.
Nice. So that's cool. So that'll be, you don't have to wait for TSGo for that. That'll just be in the next TypeScript release.
That's right. In
cool.
version 6. Next, in our TypeScript news, GD 2.6. This is the TypeScript ESM runtime for Node, is now using SWC and RSPack. And this is huge because it got like an order of magnitude faster. It's pretty stupendous. This also has knock-on effects for RS Build users. People using RS Build are also getting this hot speed increase.
Yeah, because they use GD under the hood for config, it looks like. This is pretty interesting because now that Node supports ESM and TypeScript, in your mind, what's the use case now for using GD?
So I think really GD is going to power this TypeScript as like type annotations that just evaporate. Okay. I think this is going to really power that ecosystem of like, we're using TypeScript everywhere now. This just makes it easier for you to do that and do this transformation and do the types that don't require emit.
Mm-hmm.
So, which is where you want to go anyway. So I think this is just really going to help us out in, it's like rising tide raises all boats. So this helps out Node in the way that like it's making it very competitive with like Bun and Dino, Cloudflare, and other runtimes that are doing TypeScript. This is just going to make it better for TypeScript.
Yeah. And in fact, there is like a native code path, at least for Dino, and maybe they'll also add it for Node.js, perhaps. But if you're running GD within Dino, if it's supported, it'll just use the native loaders for everything. It becomes an even thinner kind of abstraction. And GD, I think, is a pretty nice fit if you don't use erasable syntax only right now, but you want to move to it, but you still want to run your TypeScript in the Node.js runtime. So that's what GD, I think, helps with. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, no, it's pretty slick. I'm really impressed with what they've been able to do in this new version. Like they were posting some really cool numbers.
Mm-hmm. What is new in the world of ECMAScript?
Yeah, some really exciting new proposals have just hit the scene. The first one was maybe kind of a miss, and it's trying to solve a miss. But there's a proposal to make non-extensible apply to private members. It's kind of nuanced here.
Yeah.
So a JavaScript object is extensible if new properties can be added to it. Objects are born extensible and may be made non-extensible by prevent extension. Being made non-extensible is one way. Once non-extensible, an object cannot become extensible again. Private fields, however, do not respect objects' extensibility. They can still be added to an object. For example, you can go ahead and like do this. It's like, oh, I'm going to make a non-extensible type. I'm going to do object.prevent extension. And then I'm going to go ahead and do a subclass of that and tack on a private type to this of that. And it'll work.
That seems like it could lead to like security issues, don't you think?
Maybe?
Yeah, because if you give me a non-extensible object, but then I can work around it by adding private fields, then I've sort of defeated the purpose.
I could maybe see a world where this is a vector.
And I don't know, that's probably not one of the motivations, but I think it just makes sense that like, if you say it's not extensible, you should not be able to add private fields on it. But it is a breaking change, right?
That's right. Yeah. So this is a breaking change. Hat tip to Rob Palmer. I think the champions are Mark Miller, Shuyu Go, Chip Morningstar, and Eric Marks.
Cool. What else you got?
We got another one, which is from Dan Rossenwasser, which I will love him forever if this gets approved, but it's push all to arrays. How many times have you wanted to push multiple things onto an array?
Hold on, though, because I can push multiple things to an array right now. So what's the catch with that?
So here's the problem. So you can do like, let's say I have like, an array and I'm doing like array.push and I do a spread operator.
Yeah.
But it has some problems. One is when you do like push with a ... there's a risk of a stack overflow when like that like receiver of that unary ... that spread operator is really large.
Mm-hmm.
This is not like hypothetical. There's like a bug in Node where this was reported. Also, you need to mitigate this, you need to push one at a time, but that's super slow. Like, unless the engine can detect that and do something special,
Mm-hmm.
Like it's might not be optimized. Also, whenever you do a spread like that, you need to like do an allocation and do like a reallocation. So it's like not great from a memory perspective. So if you'd had like a native push all, you could do like optimizations and it could be fast.
Mm-hmm.
And it could be fast at like the engine level.
Yeah, this would actually be really, really nice. And not only from the perspective of like you're working with a lot of memory, but like game engines could really benefit from this.
Exactly. We do this kind of thing a lot because we're adding things to arrays and taking them out of arrays.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to do a lot of trickery to make it not suck. And this would just improve things a lot.
Yep. That'd be great. The next one that I see is iterator chunking, which is pretty cool. So this would let you make iterators that can chunk in window content. So let's say you have an array, you call .values on it, which gives you an iterator, and this would add two APIs to it, .chunks and .windows. So this, I think, you can look at the motivational examples, but I can imagine this is also kind of a really nice optimization technique if you want to work with really big arrays and iterators.
Yeah, I could also see this being like a nice way of doing pagination potentially.
Yeah.
I could see it using that. I could also see it like for like batch processing. Like you're pulling stuff off of a queue and you have an iterable that's giving you stuff off the network, and you could just chew through it like chunks at a time, whatever you have capacity for. Yeah, I think this is really cool.
Nice. Well, we'll track them and see where they go.
Next up, we have Captain Web, a new RPC system for browsers and web servers from Cloudflare. And you're like, what? RPC? Wasn't SOAP terrible? And I will be like, yes, SOAP was terrible, but this maybe is not. So one kind of nicety about using RPC is you get strongly typed clients kind of out of the box. They have a couple of like motivating examples where they're like, we have like a WebSocket and we want to send like RPC over it. But we don't want to have to think about how to do WebSocket thingies. We can just do it and we can get strong types with it. So you can, certainly do this with like REST, and you can certainly like do this with other, like you can do this kind of thing. This is just another way of doing communication across different, network partitions, but it's pretty nice. Now with async await, you can kind of just treat like things as objects, and you can just await on like the thing that would RPC, which is kind of nice.
Nice. This is, I guess, what's coming to mind for me is like protobuf, right? Is a RPC protocol. And what's cool about that isn't that from Google, I think? And you can like create strongly typed clients from it. So if your API exposes a protobuf interface, you can easily make clients for it. But I haven't really used protobuf too much, except that I know that it's pretty efficient over the wire. So be interested to see like how Captain Web compares to that.
That's right.
This is because it's in TypeScript. I think it might be even a better fit for websites and JavaScript.
That's right. But what's interesting here is they're doing like a JSON-based protocol, which I might have expected like maybe a binary one, because if we're like doing an RPC, it might make sense to do like, for example, protobuf, you're doing binary over the wire, which can save you, it can save you quite a bit, especially like in latency. So like if a message doesn't have to split packets, you can actually get an incredible speed up if you can send fewer packets to send the same message. Certainly in WebSockets, a lot of times, like if you're doing like games, you try to make your message like fit in one packet. So that you don't have to do like extensive like stuff, and like especially for games, that becomes a big deal. But they're doing structured clone based serialization. So they're doing anything that they use a fixed set of types that are like structured clonable. So anything that hops the barrier needs to be a structured clonable type, and that is enforced by the type system that they have. So you can't like shoot yourself in the foot.
Cool. Sweet. Well, do they mention where they are using this right now?
Let's take a look. Captain Web is still new and highly experimental, so there might be bugs to shake out, but they're using it today. It's now the basis of the recently launched remote bindings feature in Wrangler, which allows a local test instance of workerd to speak RPC to services in production. Which, awesome. I haven't used any of that before. And they've also begun to experiment with this in various like front-end applications in Cloudflare.
Cool.
And we'll see more blog posts. So it seems like they're pretty invested in this technology.
Well, it seems like if you are going to be opting into some of Cloudflare's features, that you might run into this and start using it. That's cool.
Yeah. I can definitely see this as being like a huge pro for like strongly typed clients, especially like if you're looking at doing stuff in the enterprise or you're doing like stuff with microservices, having strongly typed clients to the various things you're talking to just really takes the edge off of like, oh, I cannot typo this URL in my configuration.
Well, Cloudflare's been on a tear. We have a couple more blog posts from them. The next one is called Code Mode, the better way to use MCP. I feel like this requires a little bit of background because, Eric, how familiar are you with how MCP works?
I am like surface level familiar with MCP. I have the joke, which is the S in MCP stands for security, so I know that one. I know that MCPs are if you were to paint it with extremely broad brush, it's an API, but we were talking offline, it's like an API that kind of goes both ways.
Yeah, it's bidirectional.
And that's all I really got.
Well, it's fine. You can take my course later to learn more about MCP. But anyway, right now, the way that you call tools on an MCP, the LLM will generate like the tool call. Like it basically generates text tokens for like, here is the JSON RPC to send to the MCP server to call this tool. Well, as you can imagine, sometimes that just doesn't work very well. So it fails. It will fail to call the tool. So what Cloudflare is saying, their hypothesis, their argument is basically that LLMs are better at writing code to call tools than actually trying to shoehorn tool calling into text. So I think on the face of it, this makes a lot of sense. So LLMs have seen more TypeScript code than they have like MCP tool calling code. And so they're just better at generating TypeScript that calls an API. So basically what Cloudflare is doing for their agent offering is like if you switch to code mode, they will auto-generate a TypeScript SDK. Like basically they will generate a TypeScript interface for the MCP server, and then it will use that to call the tools in your MCP server. It's like a proxy kind of on top of your MCP server that you're hosting. And the way that this works is pretty interesting because you might be like, well, where do they execute that JavaScript? Like where does the LLM execute that JavaScript code? And it's containerized, but they're not really containers because containers are pretty heavyweight. Cloudflare uses something called V8 isolates, which is incredibly lightweight. They say that they can boot them up within milliseconds, and they're like not even worth caring about, basically. Like you can just create one and throw it away. You don't have to worry about managing them at scale or whatever. So they're just super, super, super lightweight. And they're just sandboxes to execute JavaScript code. So I think in the blog post, they call it like super eval. You can imagine like the eval function in JavaScript. This is like super eval. So it's like safe, sandboxed, and it writes the code to call your tool. And then their layer will translate that back to the LLM. So it's compatible with like the current MCP ecosystem, but it makes tool calling a lot more deterministic and reliable, which is pretty cool, I think.
Yeah, because it generates the code for you once, and then you can like look at the code.
Yep.
And this is kind of the advice that we've received a few times for like, don't just like have it run the LLM every time. Have it generate a tool for you. Have it generate code that does the thing, and then you can tweak that code.
Yeah, and so just to be clear, this is not generating code that like calls your database. This is literally generating code that represents your MCP tools as an API. So like we've said, people have been saying, and you just said too, MCP is just like an API. So it sort of is, but it's also more like a real-time communication interface because the server can initiate stuff from the client, so it's bidirectional. So it's a little bit more interactive than just a pure request response. So being able to generate a client for that is pretty cool. So anyway, I guess we'll see where this will lead. This is something that is only offered through Cloudflare's agent platform. But what is kind of neat is that there was a blog post written back in August by Armin Ronasher. Sorry, I'm probably not pronouncing that right. But the blog post was, your MCP doesn't need 30 tools, it needs code. And one of the things that using code solves is this issue of like LLMs getting overwhelmed with how many tools there are. Because when you're just exposing one tool, like you're taking your 30 different things that your MPC server does that were exposed as tools, and then code mode is just basically creating one tool, which is call this API, like call this SDK. And then it's way better at figuring out exactly what parameters to generate to pass. So it reduces like this tool overwhelm, basically, is like what this is supposed to help with. So anyway, MCP is still like really novel and new, and there's all sorts of like things people are trying to figure out with it to make it more reliable, but it is pretty cool. So we'll see kind of how the spec evolves, and maybe this will work its way into the spec somehow, or we'll see more sophisticated clients and hosts that can do this sort of code generation. But yeah, we'll see.
Awesome. You know what?
Yeah.
Cloudflare has a post by James Snell, all of the Node.js compatibility work they've done over the entire year, which is huge. And they have a link to like an article of like they support nearly all of the Node.js APIs. This is kind of, honestly, this year it kind of feels like it's been Node rising. It's like there's been there's all these competitors coming Node, and then Node rises and like fights Bane out of Gotham, like that kind of thing. We're still talking about Node, right?
Yeah.
But there's only a couple APIs here in their documentation that aren't supported.
Yeah. And you can actually look back and listen to the runtimes and fun times episode, because in there we sort of mentioned workerd, and we said that, it's not fully compatible with Node.js. And it had, at that time, I think it even had less compatibility than like Bun or Dino with Node. But now, like all the runtimes across the board have been increasing their Node compatibility. And so I don't know, does it say like what the exact percentage is? But it's much, much higher now with workerd.
It's much higher. I think it's like, I'm looking at the things that are like, there's stuff that's coming soon. There's stuff that's not supported. But like, I think there's the OS API is not supported. HTTP2 is not supported. Everything else, okay, Datagram, UDP datagrams are not supported, but everything else either has full support or partial support, which is planned, which is wild. Like that's an incredible amount. And if you would like to get these in your workers, you can enable the Node.js compat flag in your Wrangler config, either your Wrangler TOML or your Wrangler JSON-C. You can also toggle this bit in the Cloudflare dashboard, #not-sponsored. But again, they're all about compatibility. So there's a flag to turn this on so that you can get all that. Because before, like a whole bunch of these APIs might have done something different because they couldn't support it in the current world order. So it's just important to know how things are changing. But for the most part, it mirrors what Node would do. And then they're going to do whatever's reasonable for Cloudflare to do. Like, because obviously they can't do everything that Node could do in a worker, but the fact that they've got like support here is pretty amazing.
Awesome. Moving on to more supply chain stuff. Guess what? We don't have an attack to talk about today, which is good news. But instead, we can talk about GitHub's blog post, our plan for a more secure NPM supply chain. So I think they've gotten the hint, and especially after the Shai Hulud attack, they're like, maybe we should take some action here. So of course, big enterprise, I'm sure it takes a little while to move the ship, but now they have a plan, so they shared it with everybody. So we should go through that a little bit, because you've already implemented part of this plan that they talk about. So just quoting from the blog post, the too long didn't read. To address token abuse and self-replicating malware, we will be changing authentication and publishing options in the near future to only include local publishing with required two-factor authentication. That's when you run npm publish locally. Granular tokens, which will have a limited lifetime of 7 days instead of a like rotating 90-day or longer token. And then trusted publishing, which is that provenance through CI/CD or GitHub Actions or whatever you're using. Those are only going to be the 3 supported ways to publish packages. And so what this means is that they are going to deprecate the legacy classic tokens they're going to deprecate time-based one-time password two-factor auth, and they're going to be migrating users to FIDO-based two-factor auth. Roof, roof.
Ruff,
FIDO.
ruff.
Actually,
They are.
what does FIDO stand for? FIDO.
If you haven't heard this before, I wouldn't fault you, but this is called the Fast Identity Online. And this is kind of the thing that's backing, if you've seen all of these passkey things popping up on websites now.
Okay.
This is the thing behind that.
Okay.
So the idea is this is passwordless authentication, generally using passkeys as the first and primary factor for account authentication. So when you register for like a service online, the client is registered to perform authentication and it generates a key pair that only works for that website or whatever. And then that public key is, shot to the service. So the service has the public key, which is okay, right? Because you can share your public key. Everyone can know your public key. The private key stays on the device. It never leaves. No one knows the private key. And then what happens is this private key is unlocked and used to sign things by the user. Usually this private key is used to sign things using like a biometric. So like you might have a PIN that you have to type in, or you might have like a biometric like your iris or your thumbprint or whatever. But the idea is we're using like cryptographic hardware on your device or like on an external device that is holding onto this private key, and then it's using it to sign tokens that can be verified by the public key on this other side. So yeah, so that's the idea. It's using asymmetric key cryptography to do this authentication, which is way better than passwords. So that's the idea.
Well, they're going to be moving everybody to that. So migrating users to the passkey-based two-factor authentication. They are also going to limit granular tokens with publishing permissions to a shorter expiration. They are going to set publishing access to disallow tokens by default, which makes sense, and encourage the use of trusted publishers or two-factor authentication enforced local publishing. So that means that when you create your brand new NPM package, you're going to have to explicitly allow granular tokens, and they're only going to last a very, very short amount of time. So they're going to make it really painful for you to do that. They are going to push you towards either using two-factor auth locally or just using a trusted publisher. They're going to remove the option to bypass two-factor auth for local package publishing. So you're not going to have the option just to not do it. You're going to have to do it. And then they're also going to expand eligible providers for trusted publishing. This is great news because, Eric, you had mentioned before, if GitHub Actions is the only one in the ecosystem who is trusted for publishing, that is not great.
Yeah, and as of this recording, I did notice that GitLab is supported now.
Perfect, yeah.
And if you are in .NET, NuGet just very recently published their trusted publishing guidelines. And I just went and did it. And it wasn't hard. It was actually, I think, easier than NPM's.
Yep. Good. I mean, me and you use GitHub Actions, but there are a lot of enterprises that use other services. So I think it's just better for the whole ecosystem if we get more trusted publishers.
That's right.
All right. Last but not least, we've got some meta framework news, really just that Astro 5.14 dropped. So a lot of you folks love Astro for good reason, and they've got some new goodies for you. We're not going to go through every single thing, and I did not see anything super specific to TypeScript either. I think the two notable things, if you're using Svelte with Astro, they added async rendering support. So that allows you to interleave async calls with synchronous calls when rendering a component, which is pretty cool. And then they've also added React 19 actions integration. So that's pretty sweet.
All right, let's move on to some community highlights.
Yeah. First up, there's a free course at Scrimba on TypeScript. And they just updated it to add a module for learning TypeScript with Express. So if you ever wanted to write an Express server in TypeScript and kind of learn how to do that from scratch, they just added that. Otherwise, the whole course sort of goes through soup to nuts TypeScript. So you can take a look at that if you would like to. Next up, David Brownman published a blog post on Python-style kwargs in TypeScript. I've never used Python-style kwargs. Have you? Do you know what this is?
I have used Python style kwargs in the past. And this is, you've probably actually used something similar in .NET, but this is kind of like you have like a REST parameter with, you effectively, you have this like option bag situation perhaps. And the kwarg stands for keyword args. So you might have like prefix equals some thing. And you might have multiple of these, like, in .NET, I think you can do this named parameter as well.
Parameters, yeah.
Like you can do like a name parameter, this, which good and bad. And then in TypeScript, I guess one way that we wind up doing it is with, option bags, where you might have like, okay, this is the parameters, and then you might have an optional option bag, which is like a dictionary of things that you might put in there. And I think that might be how they do it. Yeah. And that's how they do it. But they add in kind of the defaulting behavior that you might see in kwargs, where you have like, okay, these things need to have some reasonable defaults, but we want to allow people to set them to whatever they might need in their use case. But this is a thing that we do all the time. And in fact, I think if you find yourself, reaching for that third parameter in a function, you should ask yourself, should I keep going down this road, or do I need to do like an option bag situation here? And that's kind of a philosophy that we've kind of stuck to in Excalibur a lot of the time, is using option bags. One, in TypeScript, they're awesome because you can get type hints when you start opening up that mustache and you start typing in it, and you can get like IntelliSense, which is super nice. And two, you keep the API really clean, so you don't have to do this weird thing that you might have seen in like C or C++, where you might call a function, you'd be like parameter 1 is this, and then you have like null, 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 and then the parameter I care about, and then null, 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 and then another parameter I care about. And there's like 7 or 8 parameters in this function call, and you're real sad about it. Yes. And no one knows what it's doing either. So one nice thing about the keyword is like there's some documentation here too.
Yep. Very cool. Well, you should go check that out, because I think that is a common pattern. So it's cool to see. I like the automatic setting of defaults. Kind of reminds me of the way React had default props that you could set. And then they kind of deprecated that with functional components, because you could use like the destructuring style and set a default through the equal sign, optional arguments and stuff. Okay, so next, I found something that you will like, Eric, but this is from Jimbly, and it's called From Steam to Floppy, Porting Modern TypeScript to Run on DOS. So this is very eclectic, I feel like, but it's pretty funny. And there are some practical takeaways, but first, like basically what this game dev did. So he has this game and is running on Electron and published as a Steam game, but he thought, wouldn't it be fun, because it has this retro aesthetic, this sort of like DOS retro aesthetic, and he was thinking, wouldn't it be cool if I could actually like give this to people on DOS, like they can install it on Microsoft DOS and run the game, but it's written in TypeScript. And so he goes through, it's a really long blog post, but it goes into a lot of detail about different projects that they used. But the one that they landed on is called JSH, which is a script interpreter for DOS-based operating systems supporting JavaScript. And yeah, that's pretty cool. So he didn't really even have to he didn't have to go through the work of writing an interpreter. There already was one. What he did have to do was adjust his code so that, if it's in the JSH environment, it does something different, like with reading from the file system versus like Node.js. So he goes through that detail, and he's open sourced pretty much all of that logic, all the bridge code and things like that. If the two people in the audience want to run their JavaScript on DOS, he's got stuff for you. Now, the other like practical takeaway that I think is applicable to anybody here is the way that he talked about using Docker containers, because it's kind of funny. He was saying, I rather dislike Docker containers to run apps, but I love Docker containers to reproducibly build apps.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is something that is useful, thinking about Docker in terms of a reproducible build, so that you come back to work on something years later and it just works because you have the image. So as long as you have that image on Docker Hub or back it up, you can always get back to a reproducible build. So I think that's super important. That's actually how I migrated all my build infrastructure to be Docker based as well.
Super slick.
Yeah.
Speaking of video games, I also ran into something very interesting, running JavaScript on a PlayStation.
This is like putting JavaScript in places where it should never have gone in the first place.
You know what's wild is I'm looking at all of these like techniques, and they're basically doing what I'm doing for my game to go on Switch. Is I'm adding a bespoke like build of Quick.js, and then building like enough of a like wrapper around Quick.js to do what I need to do. So in this case, this game dev JS legend, they went and used a project called Athena, which is just enough Quick.js and boilerplate to run on a PlayStation, which is so cool. PlayStation 2 specifically. And then he posted up a template with his game. And so he ported one of his JavaScript games to the PlayStation and is running it on a PlayStation emulator. And he goes through like the whole process of building like an ISO for it and like really getting it to like, maybe you could print a disk and put it in a PlayStation. I'd be really curious if it worked. But it's very cool. But like, yeah, like JavaScript can go anywhere. Now with some of these like more like eclectic runtimes, like MU.js and Quick.js, and I think there's a few others that are up and coming. Like Porphyr looks really interesting as well. Effectively, this is what React Native is doing as well. If you're like this is so new. It's like, actually, this is kind of what React Native does. It's like they built their own JavaScript interpreter in just enough of a browser to run React. So why not? Why not apply the same technique at other places?
Yep, that's right. Cool. Well, let's end on a little discussion that I found on Reddit. It was one of the top voted threads for this past week. It's titled, "Is Effect.ts really good, or is it just hype?"
Ooh, spicy.
Yeah.
Let's see what Reddit has to say.
But not too spicy. Yeah. I think it was pretty measured inside of the responses. So there was people saying that, it's really nice. It's like, it's a great library. It does add more complexity to your code, but it can be really helpful for certain use cases, specifically where like you want to have better error handling. So it's like a really good fit for backend services. So if you're doing full stack TypeScript and you want better error handling on your backend, that's probably where it's a great fit. A few people said, to get the most out of it, you probably want buy-in from the whole team. So if you have some functional nerds on your team, you'll probably are really going to like it. If you don't know what a monad is, you might not like it. So it does come with some overhead, but I think the error pipelining and workflows and stuff could be super helpful. One thing that it's kind of reminded me of, if your app does like Saga-based workflows and stuff, I think that Effect.ts could be helpful in that situation because you're already doing like pretty complex stuff with Sagas, and it has a very Saga-like pipeline system. Yeah.
Maybe I'll look at this because I do have a Saga use case that I am working on right now for my day job.
Mm-hmm.
So I might actually take a strong look at this, or at least maybe try to derive some of the principles. My personal taste with Effect, it kind of clashes with my personal taste a little bit, but I do recognize that error pipelining is super valuable. That dependency injection and like knowing what the dependencies to your code is super valuable, and having that part of the type system.
Yes.
Chef's kiss.
Yeah, and there was a few people that said that lightweight dependency injection, super helpful for mocking and testing. That's what they really appreciated. But I mean, there was plenty of like measured responses of like, this part is pretty complicated. You might not need that, like you can just kind of pick and choose what you might want from it. But it could also give you an idea of like smaller libraries that just do some of the dedicated stuff. Like we talked about the result typing thing you can do with like just a micro library if you want to do result types instead of throwing errors and doing exception-based results and stuff. Cool.
Yeah. Well, I've got some cool links.
And
a lot of them are, video game related. So I'll save those to the end and start with the one that's not video game related. I suppose you could use it for video games, but it's not video game related. I have a cool link. I don't even know where I got it. It showed up on my list of things, but it's called tinyhelpers.dev. and it's got like a whole bunch of, those like little tools that you need. Like I need a color picker. I need to go find like a QR code generator. I need to generate a QR code for free. I need accessible colors. I need to convert a PDF to a JPEG. I need to do like random stuff, random utility app. So this is just a website with a whole bunch of those things.
That's right. And it's by Stefan Judas, who does the Web Weekly. And I think he posted about it on Blue Sky, which is probably where you saw it.
Oh, yeah. No, I did write that down. Ha! That's funny. Otherwise, I have a really great link here from Martin Gritter, who is one of the local game devs that hangs out with us. But he has a link of all of the cool people in the Twin Cities that make video games on itch. So go check that out. And speaking of itch, we have a demo from someone who's releasing a game on Steam, built in Excalibur. Now that's a big dragon. Their demo is now available on itch. So you can go check that out, and I'll have a link. Justin, one of our contributors, has a link on itch to their jam game for the Falling Blocks jam called Escape the Well, where you are a squirrel trying to escape the well that's flooding on top of falling blocks. It's a lot of fun.
That's fun. I have one tech cool link and then one non-tech. So I'd never heard of this service before, but you've probably heard of ngrok, which allows you to do like a local reverse proxy. So you can create a domain and then have it be pointing to your local host. So I've used that before to test, like from my phone. I want to test what the mobile experience looks like on my local machine without having to do a deployment. So there's another service, one that specifically focuses on taking care of TLS certificates and HTTPS stuff for you, and it's called Caddy, and it's a similar thing. It creates a reverse proxy, but it generates all the domains for you, and it automatically renews and handles all the TLS certificates transparently for you. Don't even have to think about it. And then they have a Vite plugin so that you can magically generate HTTPS domains and TLS certificates for all of your local Vite servers, all your dev servers. Yeah. So this is something that is a huge pain to do manually, like configuring TLS and HTTPS for local dev, and Caddy just does it for you. Wow.
That's so cool.
Which is pretty cool. Yeah. So people can check that out. And thanks to Nukaya on Blue Sky for pointing that out. Then the other cool link I have is just an annual reminder to go and check your state government website for any unclaimed property or money that you might have. And every state has this. So just search for, Minnesota unclaimed property. Go to the government website first, and then that will link you to whatever contractor that they work with to look up your stuff. But basically, put in your first and last name, and maybe also some nicknames that you might have, or just do your last name, and look through the results, because sometimes you might get sent a check from like Verizon or the cable company or whatever, and it went to the wrong address, and then it got sent back in the mail. The state just holds it for you. So you can just claim it. You have to prove that it's yours, but you just fill out the forms, and then you can get paid. Some people have over $1,000 that is just sitting there that they just forgot about or have not claimed. My sister-in-law has like $50 that she could claim. Me and my wife have never had anything unclaimed, but my dad has. So I was just texting my dad the other day, hey, go claim this, because it's like from years and years ago at our old address it was sent to. And plus, I think it was my money because it was sent from Google affiliates. So like this is back when I was making websites that had Google ads on it, and I think Google sent me a check and my dad never got it. So anyway, so you should go check that out. Search for your whole family, or search for your immediate family or whatever, and let people know if they have unclaimed property. And yes, it's for real. This is not like a scam or anything. And that's why I said go to the official government landing page and then click the link to find your unclaimed property.
Yep. Yeah. Government websites end in .gov, by the way. Wow, I found some stuff. So I'm going to have to go take care of that.
Sweet. Yes, that's what I want. This is like, there's going to be some listeners in the audience who have unclaimed property, and I just want to make their day. So hopefully it does.
Awesome. Well, now it's time for the Minnesota goodbye.
Yeah.
So what's your takeaway for this episode?
Just looking at some of the news here, I think
Node rises, Batman.
Node rising, more secure NPM supply chain. Cloudflare is doing a lot of stuff. Yeah, I think just like it's becoming harder and harder to know when to not use Node.js. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
Node.js is sort of catching up to a lot of its competitors or alternatives in the ecosystem. So like I just wonder how many of these like runtimes does there need to be in the future? Because like Workerd is Cloudflare's JavaScript runtime. But once it has like not quite full Node compatibility, I just wonder if there in the future is going to be like a Node Lite. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Sort of like a Node, an official Node project that is a more limited or pared back runtime. And then all these like custom serverless runtimes just kind of disappear because now we have an official Node version.
Yeah. It's feeling to me like Node is becoming the de facto server JavaScript environment.
Mm-hmm.
Like, or at least the APIs are constituting the surface of programming that you want to do in JavaScript just by merit of all the other runtimes implementing it to some degree.
Yep. Well, remember, there is actually the working group, right?
That's right. Yeah.
That is working on like a common baseline.
Yeah, I think it's Winter CG or Winter TC. I always forget which one it is now.
It's Winter something. Yes.
They changed their name, and I always guess wrong.
Yep. I think of it as like is it Winter Twin Cities or is it Winter CG? I don't know. But yeah, anyway, there is a working group. Like maybe that is going to be something in the future. At the very least, having that kind of baseline would make it easier to figure out like what can I use or like what should I use for my different things. And then JavaScript is going like all these different places. You can pretty much run it anywhere. Like if you can run it on DOS, like you can pretty much run it anywhere.
Yeah. I think what we might start seeing is perhaps more niche runtimes that solve a very specific problem and might have some limitations therein versus like being the Swiss Army knife where you solve all problems, but maybe not all of them super well. Because I keep coming back to like, I feel like Node is such a safe bet for an enterprise to make that I would be remiss to not pick it. I think if I were a startup or if I were like just a solopreneur, I might make a different decision. But if I were in an enterprise, I just don't think I could justify not picking Node based on the current environment, the way the chips have fallen right now.
And I think that's I think a huge motivation for GitHub to get their act together for securing the supply chain, because they probably have a bunch of enterprises knocking on their door being like, what are you going to do about this? Because we are bought into the Node ecosystem. It's not like we can just migrate off of it immediately. And where would we go anyway? Because supply chain attacks are not something that is exclusive to NPM. So I'm just glad that they are taking action, and that we're probably going to see other registries implement these same things, even if they haven't had as high profile of attacks.
Yeah. And I know we talked about this a little bit, but other package managers are susceptible to the same type of attack. It's not just because it's JavaScript. Like certainly maybe that makes it easier, but like plenty of other languages have the same problems that led to like Shai-Hulud being so effective. So it's really a systemic thing that we need to address. And going back to an earlier point about runtimes, I think runtimes now are going to need to, one, lead with security. I think that's just like that's table stakes now. I think you really need to be leading with security. And then I think, two, they're going to have to find their niche, because I think the Node API is kind of table stakes now.
Well, yeah. You can see if Bun and Dino and Worker D are all trying to have node compatibility, then that says something, right? This is sort of out there, but what would be really cool to see, and I don't even know if this is really possible, but like if we have this backend server API surface that we all agree on from, let's say, the winter working group, whatever it's called.
Yeah.
Let's say that we have that in place. Could I then implement JavaScript runtimes for different programming languages? Let's say Go, let's say C#, let's say Rust, where I can then take my full stack TypeScript frameworks like Svelte or React or React Router or Astro, and then run them on this backend runtime that is running .NET or Go or Rust, but I can still write my limited subset of server code in TypeScript.
Oh, yeah. No, I feel like you could. I mean, certainly there is some overhead to doing that, right? If I'm like doing a naive move and I'm like embedding a node process in .NET, for example, to do like server-side rendering of React or Solid or whatever you're doing. So like you want a backend that's in .NET perhaps, and then you want a front end that's React, or maybe you want a hybrid backend. You want some of it in TypeScript, some of it in C#, some of it in something else. I could definitely see a world where that becomes more and more possible with JavaScript.
Because that would be cool. I mean, I think what the end result, what I'm looking for, is like I want to be able to write my Svelte code or my Astro on my front end, but then have server-side rendering on my back end, which is not Node.js. It's like I'm using .NET or whatever, because for whatever reason, for security reasons or for performance reasons, I want to do that. But then I can't do server-side rendering right now if I do that. I have to have a back end for front end architecture where I have a thin kind of front end layer that's like Node.js or Dino or whatever that's doing my server-side rendering. But then the rest of my API and backend is on a separate, processor server that's all .NET or whatever my preferred language is. So it would be cool if I didn't have to do that. Like, I just want to write my server-side rendered TypeScript app in, run the framework in .NET, but like not have it have a huge amount of overhead or performance issues. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I definitely feel like my tea leaf reading for Node is good. Like, it does seem like that's where we're headed. And Node has really picked up a lot of steam lately, feels like. And a lot of people seem to just be buying into that as the de facto standard.
Yeah, well, we'll see where it goes, I guess.
Yeah, no, I'm excited. I'm really excited. JavaScript running everywhere. Whether it should or shouldn't.
Yep. Nice. All right. Well, you have a good one. I'll see you later.
See you later. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Hi, everyone. This is Kamran. I just wanted to thank you for listening to the show, and we hope you enjoyed the episode. If you want to see the show notes, you can check your podcast player or go to TypeScript.fm, where you'll see a list of all the episodes. If you enjoyed the show, tell your friends, and please rate it on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, because that's how the show grows and gets discovered by more people. If you want to suggest news or a project that should be covered, or just want to say hi, email us at feedback@typescript.fm. If you want to follow us on social, we're both active on Blue Sky. I'm at comronicus.com, and Eric is at ericonerheim.com. You can also follow the show directly at typescript.fm.